Welcome back. Tonight, we're drifting into the golden sands and harsh truths of ancient Egypt. Not the one of glossy museum displays and Cleopatra's eyeliner, but the real one. A world of scorching heat, brutal labor, sacred rules and punishments that would make your skin crawl. You might think life along the Nile was peaceful, but truth is, most of us wouldn't last a day. This isn't a bedtime story, but it is the kind of history that lulls you in, strange, gritty, a little unsettling. If you're into that, feel free to like or subscribe, only if it feels right. And let me know, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it for you? It's fascinating to think we're all here, scattered across time zones, drawn together by the strange comfort of boring, brutal history. So get cozy, dim the lights, maybe let the hum of your fan or some desert wind ambience play in the background. We're about to enter a world of gods, plagues and pyramids, where sleep might be the only safe escape. You wake before the sun touches the horizon, as you have every morning for the past 3 decades of your life. The air carries the familiar scent of the great river. That mixture of wet earth, papyrus reeds, and something deeper, something that speaks of life itself flowing past your mud brick dwelling. This is the flood season, the time when the waters rise and transform your world from a narrow strip of green into a vast, shimmering lake that stretches beyond sight. Your bare feet touch the packed earth floor, still cool from the night. Through the single window opening, you glimpse the first pale light reflecting off the swollen river. The sound reaches you constantly, a gentle lapping that never ceases, punctuated by the distant calls of ibises and the splash of fish breaking the surface. This rhythm has governed your existence since childhood, as it governed your father's life and his father's before him. You are a farmer, though for the next 3 months, the concept holds little meaning. Your fields lie beneath 20 cubits of water, the boundary stones of your plot somewhere far below the surface. The rich, black soil that feeds your family sleeps under this temporary sea, drinking deeply of the river's gifts. Your neighbors speak of this time as a blessing from the gods, and perhaps they are right. Without these floods, your world would be nothing but endless sand stretching to the edges of creation. The village around you stirs to life with practiced efficiency. You hear the soft murmur of your neighbor grinding grain on her stone quern, the rhythm steady and hypnotic. Her husband's cough echoes from their dwelling, a sound that has grown worse over the past weeks, though neither of them speaks of it. Such concerns belong to the gods and the physicians in the great cities downriver. Here, you concern yourself with what can be controlled: the preparation of food, the mending of nets, the endless small tasks that fill these months when the earth rests. You step outside and immediately feel the oppressive weight of air thick with moisture. The sun climbs steadily, promising another day where the heat will press down like a physical burden. Already sweat beads on your forehead, though you have barely moved. Your tunic, woven from flax grown in these very fields during seasons past, clings uncomfortably to your skin. The fabric, once white, now bears the permanent stains of a life lived close to the earth. Brown from mud, yellow from reeds, darker patches where sweat and work have left their marks. The familiar ache in your lower back reminds you of yesterday's labor. During flood season, when your own fields remain unreachable, you join the great work projects that employ thousands. You carry limestone blocks, each one weighing more than a grown man, hauling them on wooden rollers under the merciless sun. Your hands, already calloused from years of handling the plow and sickle, have developed new layers of hardened skin from gripping rope and stone. The foreman, a thin man with calculating eyes, marks your daily work with notches on his wooden tally stick. Your rations depend entirely on those marks. Your wife emerges from the dwelling, her face already showing the strain of the day ahead. She carries your youngest child, a boy of perhaps 2 years, whose thin limbs speak of the constant hunger that touches every household. His eyes, large in his small face, follow the movement of everything around him with the intense curiosity of the very young. Your wife's own body shows the toll of bearing 5 children in this harsh land. Only 3 have survived their first year, and even those who remain carry the subtle signs of a life lived on the edge of want. The breakfast she offers consists of bread made from emmer wheat, dense and slightly gritty between your teeth, accompanied by a thin beer that tastes of grain and fermentation. This meal represents careful calculation, enough to provide strength for the day's work, not so much as to deplete your stores too quickly. The harvest from the last season must sustain your family until the next, and the margin for error remains impossibly narrow. You eat slowly, savoring each bite not from pleasure but from the knowledge that the next meal lies many hours away. From across the village comes the sound of an argument, voices raised in anger and desperation. You recognize the speakers, a family whose eldest son fell ill during the last harvest, leaving them short-handed during the crucial weeks when every able body meant survival. Their stores ran low early, and now they face the choice that haunts every household: which children eat today and which must wait. The argument ends abruptly, replaced by the sound of quiet weeping that carries clearly in the still air. You shoulder your tools and prepare to join the long line of workers making their way to the construction site. The walk takes you along the edge of the flood, where the boundary between water and land shifts daily. Yesterday's path lies underwater. Today you must find new footing on ground that may not exist tomorrow. The landscape around you appears utterly transformed from the familiar fields and pathways of the dry season. Landmarks disappear beneath the flood, leaving only the tops of the largest trees and the roof lines of elevated buildings to guide your way. The procession of workers stretches ahead and behind you like a human river flowing parallel to the swollen waterway. Men and women of all ages walk in resigned silence, their faces already set in the expressions they will wear throughout the long day ahead. Children old enough to work accompany their parents, their small hands clutching water jars or tool satchels. The very young and the very old remain behind, creating a village populated primarily by those too weak to contribute to the great works that rise from your collective labor. As you walk, the massive construction project reveals itself gradually through the morning haze. The pyramid rises from the plateau like a mountain being born from human will, its sides already climbing toward the sky with mathematical precision that speaks of knowledge far beyond your understanding. Thousands of workers swarm over its surface like insects, each person a tiny part of an endeavor that dwarfs individual comprehension. The scale of the undertaking fills you with a mixture of awe and dread. Awe at the ambition of those who conceived such a monument, dread at the years of your life that will be consumed in its creation. You take your place among the endless chain of laborers, your hands closing around familiar rope, your back bending to accept another day's burden. The rhythm begins again, as it has for months, as it will for months to come. Each block you move brings the monument fractionally closer to completion while carrying you fractionally closer to the end of your own brief span of years. This is your world, your reality, your inescapable truth. A life measured not in grand achievements or personal fulfillment, but in the simple persistence required to survive another day in a land where the river gives life and the desert promises death to all who cannot endure its trials. You reach the construction site as the sun climbs higher, its rays already beginning to burn through the morning coolness. The sound hits you first, a constant percussion of hammers against stone, the grinding of copper chisels cutting into limestone, the rhythmic chanting of work gangs coordinating their efforts. 10,000 voices blend into a single, droning hum that vibrates through the ground beneath your feet and seems to emanate from the very bones of the earth. The foreman who oversees your gang stands atop a wooden platform, his voice carrying across the worksite with practiced authority. He assigns today's tasks with the efficiency of a man who has performed this ritual countless times. Your group receives orders to move blocks from the quarry face to the ramp system, a distance of perhaps 200 cubits that will consume your entire day. Each block must travel this path before beginning its slow journey up the pyramid's side, and each block weighs enough to crush a man who loses his footing or fails to maintain his grip on the ropes. The quarry face rises before you like a white cliff, scarred with the geometric patterns left by countless copper tools. Workers cling to its surface at various heights, their bronze-dark skin glistening with sweat as they guide their chisels along predetermined lines. The sound of their work creates an almost musical quality. The sharp tap-tap-tap of hammer on chisel head, followed by the deeper crack as stone splits along its grain. Dust hangs in the air like a permanent haze, coating everything and everyone in a fine white powder that finds its way into your eyes, your nose, your throat. You watch a master stonemason examine a freshly cut block, his experienced hands running over its surface to detect any flaws that might compromise the pyramid structure. His fingers, you notice, bear the permanent scars of his trade, thin white lines where chisels have slipped, darker marks where stone chips have embedded themselves beneath the skin. He nods his approval, and immediately a gang of 8 men positions themselves around the block's base, sliding thick wooden levers underneath its bulk. The process of moving each block follows a choreography refined through years of trial and error. First, the block must be raised slightly using the wooden levers, creating just enough space to slide wooden rollers beneath. The men strain against their levers, their faces contorting with effort as they fight to lift stone that seems to possess its own stubborn will. You hear the deep groaning of wood under stress, punctuated by sharp commands from the gang leader who coordinates each movement. Once the rollers are in position, your team takes hold of the thick rope that will guide the block's journey. The rope itself represents weeks of work by skilled craftsmen who braided together thousands of palm fibers, creating a line strong enough to bear tremendous weight, yet flexible enough to be handled by human hands. Where the rope passes over wooden pulleys, it has worn smooth grooves in the hardwood, testament to the countless blocks that have traveled this path before. The moment arrives to begin pulling. The gang leader raises his hand and silence falls over your group. Then his arm drops and 20 men lean into the rope simultaneously. The block resists at first, its massive weight seeming to anchor it permanently to the earth. Your feet scramble for purchase on the sandy ground as you throw your entire body weight into the effort. The rope burns your palms despite their thick calluses, and you feel the familiar fire begin to build in your shoulders and back. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, the block begins to move. The first revolution of the rollers produces a grinding sound that resonates through your bones, followed by another, then another. Soon you establish a rhythm, pull, step, that will carry you through the long journey ahead. The gang leader begins a work chant, his voice setting the pace while the rest of you respond with practiced precision. The chant serves multiple purposes. It coordinates your efforts, provides a steady rhythm for the work, and helps pass the long hours through shared participation in something larger than individual struggle. As you progress across the construction site, you pass other gangs engaged in various stages of the same endless process. Some groups guide blocks up the wooden ramps that spiral around the pyramid's growing sides, their progress measured in cubits per hour rather than speed that might be called swift. Others work at the pyramid's base, using copper, plumb lines and wooden squares to ensure that each course of stones maintains perfect alignment. The precision required staggers your understanding. These blocks must fit together with gaps no wider than a knife blade, creating a structure that will endure for generations beyond counting. The heat builds steadily as the morning progresses. What began as merely warm air becomes an oppressive weight that presses down from above while radiating up from the sun-baked stone beneath your feet. Sweat streams from every pore, soaking your tunic and creating dark patches that never fully dry. The overseer's assistant moves among the work gangs carrying water jars, doling out carefully measured portions that must sustain each worker until the next distribution. You drink greedily when your turn comes, the warm, slightly bitter water tasting like salvation itself. Around midday, when the sun reaches its zenith and the heat becomes almost unbearable, work stops for the meal break. You collapse in whatever shade you can find, your legs trembling from exhaustion and your hands cramped into claws from gripping the rope. The meal consists of bread, onions and garlic, foods chosen not for their flavor, but for their ability to sustain heavy labor in extreme heat. The bread tastes of sand and effort, while the onions burn your throat, but provide the strength your body desperately needs. During this brief respite, you observe the hierarchy that governs this massive undertaking. The architects and senior engineers gather in a tent erected specifically for their use, its sides open to catch any breeze while providing relief from the direct sun. They consult papyrus scrolls covered with geometric drawings that represent mathematical concepts far beyond your education. Their clean linen garments and unmarked hands speak of lives lived in contemplation rather than physical struggle, yet their knowledge makes possible the monument that consumes your days. Below them in the hierarchy come the master craftsmen, the stonemasons, carpenters, and rope makers, whose specialized skills prove essential to the project's success. These men earn better rations, receive medical attention when injured, and enjoy a measure of respect from their peers. Their children often follow them into the same trades, creating dynasties of knowledge passed down through generations of accumulated expertise. At the bottom of this structure, you and thousands like you provide the raw labor that transforms architectural vision into physical reality. Your individual contribution might seem insignificant. One man among 10,000, one block among hundreds of thousands. Yet without your daily effort, the entire enterprise would collapse. This knowledge provides a form of dignity, even amid the crushing physical demands and constant uncertainty about whether your body will endure another season of such work. The afternoon shift begins with the same ritual preparation. But now you face the day's most challenging hours. The sun beats down with relentless intensity, turning every metal tool too hot to touch with bare skin and making the stone blocks almost unbearable to approach. The air shimmers with heat waves that distort distant objects, creating an otherworldly quality that makes the entire construction site appear to float like a mirage above the desert floor. Your current block proves particularly stubborn, its weight seeming to increase with each cubit of progress. One of the wooden rollers develops a crack that threatens to snap under the load, requiring a careful operation to replace it without losing the progress already made. This delay costs precious time and energy, both resources that exist in constantly diminishing supply as the day wears on and your body's reserves become progressively depleted. As evening approaches and the workday nears its end, you reflect on the strange mathematics of your existence. Each day you move perhaps a dozen blocks from quarry to ramp, each block representing hours of coordinated human effort. Each block will eventually find its place in the pyramid structure, becoming part of something that will outlast your civilization itself. Yet you will never see the monument completed, never witness the moment when the final capstone settles into place and the decades of labor reach their conclusion. Your contribution exists as part of an undertaking so vast that no single human mind can comprehend its totality, a project that transforms individual lives into components of something approaching immortality. The work horn sounds its mournful note across the construction site, signaling the end of another day's labor. Your hands release their grip on the rope with grateful reluctance. Grateful for the respite. Reluctant because tomorrow will demand the same effort all over again. Around you, thousands of workers begin the slow process of gathering their tools and preparing for the journey back to their villages. The pyramid casts a long shadow across the plateau, its bulk blocking the evening sun and providing the first real relief from heat you have felt since dawn. As you clean stone dust from your tools with handfuls of sand, you notice a figure approaching your work gang with purposeful strides. The scribe walks with the confident bearing of a man whose education has lifted him above the realm of physical labor, his pristine white kilt and polished sandals marking him as clearly as if he wore a crown. Under his arm he carries the tools of his trade: reed pens, a palette of black and red ink, and several rolls of precious papyrus that represent more wealth than you will see in a lifetime. The scribe stops before your gang leader and begins speaking in the clipped, efficient tones of bureaucracy. You cannot hear the specific words, but their meaning becomes clear when your leader's face darkens with concern. After a brief exchange, the scribe produces his writing materials and begins making marks on a piece of papyrus, his reed pen moving with practiced precision across the fibrous surface. Each mark represents something significant: names, numbers, calculations that will determine the fate of men and families. Your gang leader approaches with the heavy steps of a man bearing unwelcome news. The scribe, he explains, has been conducting a census of workers for the royal administration. The great construction project requires not only stones and mortar, but detailed records of every person involved, every tool used, every ration distributed. The pharaoh's officials must account for the resources being consumed in service of his eternal resting place. And this accounting touches every aspect of your existence. The scribe calls your name, reading from a list written in the hieroglyphic script that might as well be magic for all your ability to comprehend it. You approach with the mixture of fear and resignation that characterizes all interactions with authority in your world. His questions come rapidly. Your age, the number of people in your household, your skill level, your physical condition, any injuries or illnesses that might affect your work capacity. Each answer receives a careful notation on his papyrus, reducing your human complexity to a series of marks that will outlast your mortal form. When he asks about your family's food stores, you hesitate before answering. The truth: that your supplies run dangerously low and may not last until the next harvest, could result in reassignment to even more demanding work, or worse, complete dismissal from the project. Yet lying to a royal scribe carries penalties too severe to contemplate. You provide an answer that skirts the edge of honesty, describing your situation in terms that might be interpreted favorably while avoiding outright deception. The scribe's examination reveals the gulf that separates your world from his. His soft hands have never gripped stone or rope, never felt the burn of copper tools heated by desert sun. His well-fed frame carries no evidence of the constant hunger that gnaws at workers throughout the construction season. Most significantly, his ability to read and write places him among the most powerful people in the kingdom, wielding influence that extends far beyond his physical presence. As he works, you catch glimpses of the papyrus covered with his neat hieroglyphs. The writing fascinates and intimidates you in equal measure. These small pictures and symbols carry the power to change lives, to determine who receives rations and who goes hungry, who continues working and who faces punishment for inadequate performance. The scribe treats his writing materials with reverence appropriate to sacred objects, carefully cleaning his reed pen after each use and protecting the papyrus from any contact with dust or moisture. Behind the scribe stands his assistant, a young man perhaps 20 years old, whose clean appearance and confident posture suggest he too has escaped the fate of physical labor through education. He carries the scribe's additional supplies and occasionally offers suggestions about record-keeping procedures. His presence represents hope and envy in equal measure. Hope that education might lift someone from your social class, envy for the comfort and security his position provides. The census continues through your entire work gang, each man submitting to the same process of questions and documentation. Some workers reveal information that surprises you. The quiet man who works beside you supports not only his own family, but also his deceased brother's widow and children. Another has been sending portions of his rations to elderly parents in a distant village, explaining his increasingly gaunt appearance over recent weeks. These personal revelations, recorded in the scribe's permanent marks, create an intimate portrait of struggles, usually kept private. When the scribe completes his documentation of your gang, he moves on to the next group with the same methodical efficiency. You watch him work with other teams, noting how his questions adapt to different types of workers. The skilled stonemasons face inquiries about their training and capabilities, while the water carriers undergo assessment of their reliability and strength. Each category of worker receives evaluation according to different criteria, all designed to maximize their contribution to the pharaoh's monument. As evening settles over the construction site, you begin the walk back to your village with the other workers. The conversation naturally turns to the census and its implications. Some men express optimism, believing that official recognition of their service might lead to better treatment or additional rations. Others worry that the detailed records will be used to identify workers for even more demanding assignments, or to track down those who might consider abandoning the project. The scribe's assistant passes your group on his way back to the administrative compound, riding in a small cart pulled by a donkey while you walk the dusty path on foot. This simple detail encapsulates the vast differences in your respective positions. His education has earned him not only better working conditions, but also the assumption that his time and energy deserve preservation. Your illiteracy condemns you to expendable status, your value measured only in the physical labor you can provide before your body fails. Back in your village, news of the census spreads quickly among the families. Women gather around the communal grinding stones, discussing what the increased official attention might mean for their households. Children listen with wide eyes to speculation about whether the records might lead to changes in work assignments or ration distributions. The census has transformed abstract bureaucracy into a tangible presence that touches every aspect of community life. Your wife greets you with questions about the scribe's visit, her concern evident in the tight lines around her eyes. She understands, perhaps better than you do, how precarious your family's situation has become. The detailed records now include information about your household that could be used to justify reducing your rations or reassigning you to more dangerous work. The scribe's papyrus has captured not just your name and capabilities, but also your vulnerabilities. As you settle down for your evening meal, you reflect on the strange power of written words. The scribe spent mere minutes documenting your existence, yet those marks on papyrus will outlast your physical presence in the world. Long after your bones have returned to dust, some future official might consult those records to understand how the Great Pyramid was built and who built it. Your individual story has become part of a larger narrative, recorded for posterity by a system that values documentation above human dignity. The realization both humbles and disturbs you. The Pharaoh's monument will stand for thousands of years, and the records describing its construction will endure nearly as long. Yet the lives consumed in its creation, your life, the lives of your fellow workers, the countless individual stories of struggle and sacrifice, exist only as anonymous entries in administrative records. You have become a statistic in service of immortality that will never acknowledge your name or remember your contribution. Sleep comes slowly that night, your mind churning with thoughts about permanence and impermanence, about the different forms of survival available to different classes of people. The scribe will be remembered through his written works, the pharaoh through his monument, but you will disappear as completely as if you had never existed. This knowledge weighs upon you more heavily than any stone block, a burden that cannot be shared with teammates or lifted through coordinated effort. Tomorrow, you will return to the quarry, but tonight, you grapple with the knowledge that your entire existence has been reduced to marks on papyrus, documented but not truly seen, recorded but not genuinely remembered. You wake to the sound of your neighbor's harsh coughing, the same rattling wheeze that has grown steadily worse over the past month. Through the thin mud brick wall that separates your dwellings, you hear his wife's whispered prayers to the gods of healing, her voice carrying the desperation of someone watching life slowly drain from a loved one. The sound fills you with unease, not merely from sympathy, but from the knowledge that sickness spreads through communities like wildfire, consuming the weak and strong alike with indifferent hunger. The morning brings news that sends ripples of concern through your work gang. 3 men from a neighboring team failed to appear at the construction site yesterday, and the foreman's inquiries revealed they had fallen ill with the same wasting sickness that now affects families throughout the worker villages. The symptoms follow a predictable pattern. First, the persistent cough, then the fever that burns through the night. Finally, the gradual weakening that robs a person of the strength needed for physical labor. As you prepare for another day of moving stone blocks, you notice subtle changes in your own body that fill you with dread. Your throat feels slightly raw, and you find yourself clearing it more frequently than usual. The sensation might be nothing more than irritation from stone dust, or it might herald the beginning of the same illness that has claimed your neighbors. In a world where physical capability determines survival, even minor sickness carries the potential for catastrophe. The work proceeds with diminished numbers as more men fall victim to the spreading ailment. Your gang, originally 20 strong, now operates with only 15 healthy workers, forcing each remaining person to bear additional weight and responsibility. The foreman adjusts assignments accordingly, but the mathematics of pyramid construction allow little flexibility. Each block must still move from quarry to ramp, regardless of how many hands remain available to guide it. By midday, the heat and extra exertion begin taking their toll on your already stressed body. The persistent throat irritation develops into occasional coughing fits that leave you gasping for breath in the dusty air. Your fellow workers eye you with the mixture of concern and fear that accompanies potential contagion. They depend on your strength for their own safety, yet they also recognize that your illness might spread to them if you continue working in close proximity. The foreman notices your deteriorating condition and makes a decision that fills you with both relief and terror. He orders you to report to the medical tent established for treating sick workers, a canvas structure erected near the administrative compound where physicians attempt to tend the endless stream of injured and diseased laborers. The relief comes from escaping another afternoon of brutal physical exertion. The terror stems from knowing that many who enter the medical tent never return to work. The walk to the medical tent takes you through sections of the construction site you rarely see during your daily routine. Here, specialist craftsmen work with precious materials imported from distant lands: gold leaf from the southern territories, cedar wood from northern forests, intricate stone carvings that will decorate the pyramid's interior chambers. The contrast between their refined work and your crude stone-moving labor emphasizes the hierarchy that governs every aspect of the construction project. Outside the medical tent, you join a queue of sick and injured workers waiting for treatment. The man ahead of you cradles an arm clearly broken during stone-moving operations, the limb bent at an unnatural angle that makes you wince in sympathy. Behind you stands a worker whose back has given out under the constant strain of heavy lifting, his posture twisted into a permanent curve that speaks of permanent disability. Each person in line represents a different form of breakdown in the human machinery that drives the pyramid's construction. The physician who eventually examines you carries himself with the quiet authority of someone whose knowledge places him among society's elite. His clean linen garments and well-groomed appearance mark him as distinctly separate from the dusty, scarred workers he treats. He conducts his examination with professional efficiency, pressing his fingers against your throat, listening to your breathing, checking your eyes for signs of fever. His touch, gentle but impersonal, represents the closest thing to medical care available to someone of your social standing. His questions reveal the systematic approach that characterizes Egyptian medicine. He inquires about the progression of your symptoms, your eating and sleeping patterns, any similar illnesses among your family members. Each answer receives careful consideration as he applies knowledge gained through years of training in the temple schools where medical wisdom passes from master to student. His expertise represents one of the few forces capable of standing against the constant threat of disease and injury that shadows working-class life. The physician's diagnosis comes with measured certainty. You suffer from the lung sickness that has been spreading through the worker communities, likely caused by the combination of stone dust, poor nutrition, and close living conditions that characterize your daily existence. He explains that the illness follows a predictable course. Some workers recover with rest and proper treatment, while others succumb to complications that prove beyond medical intervention. Your fate depends on factors partly within his control and partly subject to the whims of the gods. His prescribed treatment reveals the limited options available to ancient medicine. You must rest completely for at least 7 days, consuming a special mixture of honey, herbs, and animal fat designed to soothe your throat and provide nutrition your weakened body desperately needs. He produces a small clay vessel containing this medicine, its contents representing a significant investment in your recovery. The cost of these materials will be deducted from your future wages, assuming you survive to earn them. The physician also provides instructions for preventing the spread of illness to your family members. You must sleep apart from your wife and children, avoid sharing eating vessels or drinking water, and cover your mouth when coughing to prevent the sickness from traveling through the air to healthy people. These precautions make sense from a medical perspective, but create practical challenges for a family living in a single small room with minimal possessions. As you prepare to leave the medical tent, the physician offers additional guidance that reveals his understanding of the broader social context surrounding your illness. He advises you to inform your family about the seriousness of your condition, not to frighten them, but to ensure they understand the economic implications if you cannot return to work. The Pyramid Project provides no compensation for sick workers, meaning your family must survive on their existing food stores until you recover or find alternative employment. The walk back to your village passes in a haze of fever and anxiety. The medicine has begun to take effect, easing the worst of your throat pain but leaving you feeling drowsy and disconnected from your surroundings. Other workers give you a wide berth, their faces showing the fear that accompanies any encounter with serious illness. You understand their reaction. In a world where medical knowledge remains limited and treatment expensive, avoiding sick people often represents the only practical defense against disease. Your wife greets your return with a mixture of relief and alarm. Relief that you have received medical attention from a trained physician, alarm at the implications of your diagnosis for the family's survival. She immediately begins implementing the isolation procedures the physician recommended, rearranging your modest possessions to create separate sleeping space and designating specific bowls and cups for your exclusive use. Her efficient response reflects the hard-won wisdom of someone who has watched other families navigate similar crises. The evening meal becomes a somber affair as you explain the physician's instructions and prognosis to your family. Your children listen with the quiet intensity of young people suddenly confronted with adult concerns about mortality and economic security. They understand, with the clarity that accompanies harsh living conditions, that your illness threatens not just your personal well-being, but the entire household's ability to survive the coming months. As night falls, you lie alone in your improvised sickbed, listening to the familiar sounds of village life continuing around you. The isolation imposed by your illness creates a strange detachment from the rhythms that have governed your existence for decades. For the first time in years, you will not wake before dawn to begin the journey to the construction site. This enforced rest should feel like luxury, but instead it fills you with anxiety about the future and regret about the income being lost with each passing day. Sleep brings fever, dreams that blend your medical treatment with memories of the physician's examination. In these visions, you see yourself from his perspective, not as an individual with hopes and fears, but as a case study in the diseases that afflict working populations. Your illness becomes part of the larger medical knowledge that physicians accumulate through treating countless similar patients, your recovery or death contributing to their understanding of how bodies respond to the stresses of pyramid construction. The night passes slowly, marked by periodic coughing fits that remind you of the battle taking place within your body. Each bout of coughing brings the possibility of improvement or deterioration, recovery or progression toward the complications the physician warned about. Your survival depends not only on the medicine he provided, but also on factors beyond any human control. The strength of your constitution, the severity of the particular strain of illness affecting you, and the favor or indifference of the gods who oversee mortal health and suffering. 7 days pass in a blur of fever, medicine, and enforced stillness. Your body fights the lung sickness with varying degrees of success, some hours bringing clear improvement while others threaten to drag you deeper into weakness. The physician's honey mixture soothes your throat, but the real healing depends on rest your family can barely afford, and nutrition that remains perpetually inadequate. On the 8th morning, you wake to find your cough significantly diminished and your strength beginning to return, though you remain far from the robust health required for pyramid construction. Your recovery coincides with a transformation that affects the entire region. Through your small window opening, you observe the great river beginning its annual retreat from the flood stage that has dominated the landscape for months. The water level drops gradually, but perceptibly, revealing muddy shorelines that expand daily as the inundation recedes toward the river's normal channel. This retreat marks the beginning of the planting season, when farmers like yourself must abandon construction work to prepare their fields for the coming agricultural cycle. The change fills you with conflicted emotions. Relief at escaping the brutal, stone-moving labor that nearly broke your health, anxiety about whether your weakened condition will allow you to perform the demanding work of cultivation. Your fields, like those of your neighbors, lie beneath a thick layer of fertile black silt deposited by the retreating floodwaters. This mud represents the foundation of survival for your family, but it must be worked quickly and efficiently to take advantage of the optimal planting conditions that follow the inundation. Your wife has spent the days of your illness preparing for this transition, mending the wooden plow that will break the sun-hardened silt, sharpening the bronze sickle used for harvesting reeds, and checking the irrigation channels that will carry water from the river to your planted fields. Her competence in managing these preparations while caring for sick family members demonstrates the resilience that characterizes women in your social class. Without her practical skills and tireless effort, your household would face certain starvation. The physician makes a final visit to assess your recovery and determine whether you can safely return to physical labor. His examination reveals significant improvement in your lung function, though he warns that the heavy work of field preparation may prove too demanding for your still healing body. He advises a gradual return to activity, beginning with light tasks and slowly increasing the intensity as your strength returns. This medical wisdom conflicts sharply with agricultural reality. Field work allows no such luxury of gradual progression. As you venture outside your dwelling for the first time since falling ill, the familiar landscape appears transformed by the receding waters. Pathways that disappeared beneath the flood now emerge as muddy tracks connecting the villages scattered across the fertile plain. Trees that stood like islands in the temporary lake now reveal their full trunks and root systems draped with debris left by the retreating waters. The air carries new scents: wet earth, decomposing vegetation, and the rich, organic smell of river silt drying under the sun. Your neighbors greet your recovery with genuine relief, not merely from personal concern, but from practical necessity. The coming weeks will require coordinated effort among all able-bodied adults in the community, and every pair of hands capable of wielding a plow or guiding irrigation water represents the difference between successful harvest and potential famine. Your illness removed you from this collective labor pool at a critical time, forcing others to shoulder additional responsibility for community survival. The foreman from the construction project visits your village to officially release workers for agricultural duties, bringing with him the final payment for your months of pyramid labor. The wages, calculated in measures of grain, oil, and linen cloth, represent significant wealth by the standards of your social class. However, the amount has been reduced to account for the days missed due to illness and the cost of medical treatment, leaving less than you had hoped to sustain your family through the planting season. Preparation for field work begins with the restoration of your agricultural tools, many of which have deteriorated during months of disuse while you labored on the pyramid. The wooden plow requires new leather bindings to hold its components together under the stress of breaking hardened earth. Your irrigation baskets, woven from palm fronds, need repairs where the dried fibers have cracked or broken. Each tool represents precious resources, wood, leather, bronze, and skilled craftsmanship that your family can barely afford to replace. The first morning of actual field work tests your recovering strength more severely than you anticipated. The waterlogged silt, while fertile, creates a consistency that challenges even healthy workers. Your wooden plow, pulled by the community's shared ox, cuts through the mud with difficulty, requiring constant pressure and guidance to maintain straight furrows. Within an hour, your chest begins to burn with the familiar sensation of overexertion, and you find yourself stopping frequently to catch your breath. Your wife works alongside you with the steady efficiency of someone accustomed to agricultural labor. She follows behind the plow, breaking up larger clods of earth with a wooden hoe and smoothing the furrows to prepare them for planting. Her movements show no wasted motion, each stroke of the hoe serving multiple purposes, aerating the soil, removing debris, and creating the proper texture for seed germination. Her skill reminds you that successful farming requires not just physical strength, but accumulated knowledge passed down through generations. The planting itself follows rituals that blend practical necessity with religious observance. Before scattering the first seeds, you pour a small offering of grain onto the earth, while speaking prayers to the goddess of the harvest, asking for her blessing on the coming crop. This ceremony serves both spiritual and practical purposes, acknowledging the divine forces that control agricultural success, while also marking the formal beginning of the planting season for your family and neighbors. The seeds you plant represent a carefully calculated gamble with survival itself. Each grain of wheat or barley placed in the earth represents food that could have sustained your family for another day, yet must be sacrificed in hopes of producing a larger harvest months in the future. The mathematics of farming require this constant balance between immediate consumption and future investment, with no margin for error in calculations that determine whether your household will survive until the next growing season. As you work, you observe the broader patterns of agricultural activity throughout the river valley. Thousands of farming families engage in identical activities, their collective efforts creating a rhythm of cultivation that has sustained Egyptian civilization for countless generations. The sight of so many people working their individual plots creates a sense of participation in something larger than personal survival, though the harsh realities of competition for resources prevent any romantic notions about agricultural cooperation. The irrigation system that brings water from the river to your fields represents one of the great achievements of Egyptian engineering, yet its maintenance requires constant vigilance and community cooperation. The main channels, dug and maintained by royal work gangs, carry water from the river to distribution points throughout the agricultural region. From these main arteries, smaller channels branch out to individual farm plots, creating a network that must be carefully managed to ensure equitable water distribution. Your family's allocation of irrigation water comes according to a schedule established by local officials and enforced by water guards who patrol the channels to prevent unauthorized usage. The system works efficiently when everyone respects the agreed-upon distribution times, but conflicts arise when upstream users take more water than their allotment permits, or when equipment failures disrupt the normal flow patterns. Such disputes can escalate quickly, threatening not only individual crops, but community harmony essential for collective survival. The physical demands of field preparation push your recovering body to its limits and beyond. Each day brings new challenges as your strength slowly returns, but proves inadequate for the intensive labor required. The combination of heavy lifting, repetitive motion, and constant bending creates a different form of exhaustion than pyramid construction, one that penetrates deep into your bones and seems to accumulate rather than dissipate with rest. By evening, you collapse into sleep with muscles that ache in ways you had forgotten during your illness. Your children contribute to the family's agricultural effort according to their ages and capabilities. The oldest, now approaching adolescence, proves capable of handling many adult tasks, including guiding the plow ox and managing irrigation flows. The younger ones gather stones from the plowed fields, chase away birds that threaten newly planted seeds, and carry water to the adults working under the increasingly intense sun. Their participation represents both immediate necessity and long-term education in the skills they will need for their own survival as adults. As the planting season progresses, you gradually accept the reality that your recovery from illness will be neither complete nor rapid. The lung sickness has left you with reduced capacity for sustained physical exertion, a limitation that will affect not only this season's agricultural work, but your ability to return to construction labor in future years. This recognition forces difficult calculations about your family's economic future and the alternative strategies that might compensate for your diminished earning potential. The growing season progresses with the relentless rhythm that governs agricultural life, each day bringing new demands as your planted fields require constant attention to survive the challenges of pests, weather, and disease. Your wheat stalks push through the dark soil with encouraging vigor, while the barley shows the robust growth that promises a reasonable harvest if conditions remain favorable. Yet even as you tend your crops with careful dedication, you cannot escape the knowledge that a significant portion of whatever you manage to produce will disappear into the pharaoh's granaries through the taxation system that forms the backbone of royal power. 3 weeks after planting, the tax assessor arrives in your village with the measured steps of a man whose authority derives from royal appointment rather than community respect. His appearance differs markedly from the scribe who conducted the worker census months earlier, where the scribe carried himself with scholarly dignity. The tax assessor projects the harder edge of someone whose responsibility involves extracting wealth from reluctant subjects. His linen garments, while clean and well-maintained, show the practical modifications of a man who spends his days tramping through muddy fields rather than sitting in comfortable administrative offices. The assessor brings with him 2 assistants and a small escort of soldiers, the latter serving both as protection against taxpayer hostility and as visible reminder of the consequences facing those who might consider resisting royal demands. The soldiers' bronze-tipped spears and leather armor mark them as professional warriors rather than conscripted farmers, men whose loyalty belongs to the pharaoh's administration rather than to the communities they patrol. Their presence transforms what might otherwise be a routine administrative procedure into a demonstration of royal power, reaching into every aspect of village life. The assessment process begins with a systematic examination of each family's agricultural holdings, the tax assessor consulting detailed records that track the size and productivity of individual plots over multiple growing seasons. These records, maintained in the regional administrative center, contain information about your land that exceeds your own knowledge. Precise measurements of field boundaries, soil quality ratings, historical yield data, and notes about improvements or deterioration in agricultural infrastructure. The thoroughness of this documentation reveals the sophisticated bureaucracy that underlies Egyptian tax collection. When the assessor reaches your plot, he measures the planted area using a rope marked with standard units. His movements precise and methodical as he establishes the exact dimensions subject to taxation. His assistant records these measurements on papyrus using hieroglyphic notations that reduce your life's work to abstract symbols comprehensible only to the educated administrative class. The process takes less than an hour, yet it determines the financial obligations that will shape your family's survival for the coming year. The assessor's evaluation extends beyond simple field measurements to include judgments about crop health, planting density, and projected yields based on current growing conditions. His experienced eye identifies the subtle signs that indicate whether your harvest will prove abundant, adequate, or disappointing. These assessments carry enormous weight because they determine not only your tax obligations, but also the timing of collection and the acceptable forms of payment. A favorable assessment might allow you to pay in grain after harvest, while an unfavorable one could require immediate payment in more valuable commodities. Your neighbor's assessment proceeds less smoothly than your own, revealing the tensions that surround tax collection in agricultural communities. His fields show evidence of the flooding problems that plagued his plot during the inundation season, leaving patches of poor drainage that will likely reduce his overall yield. When he attempts to explain these circumstances to the assessor, hoping for consideration that might reduce his tax burden, he receives only a curt reminder that royal tax obligations remain fixed regardless of individual farming difficulties. The confrontation escalates when your neighbor produces evidence of the extra labor he invested in attempting to remedy the drainage problems, arguing that these improvements should merit reduced taxation for the current season. The assessor examines the earthworks and drainage channels with professional interest, but explains that such improvements, while admirable, actually increase the long-term productivity of the land, and therefore justify higher rather than lower tax assessments in future years. This bureaucratic logic, while internally consistent, strikes farming families as fundamentally unjust. The tax assessor's calculations reveal the crushing burden that royal taxation places on agricultural families. Your obligations for the coming year include not only a percentage of your grain harvest, but also specified quantities of linen cloth, vegetable oil, and honey. Additional taxes support the temple complex, the local administrative infrastructure, and special assessments for royal construction projects like the pyramid that consumed months of your labor. When totaled, these obligations will claim roughly half of everything your family produces through a year of intensive agricultural work. The assessor offers several payment options, each carrying different advantages and risks. Immediate payment in grain or other commodities provides a slight reduction in total obligation, but requires you to sacrifice food stores before knowing whether the harvest will prove adequate for family survival. Delayed payment allows you to retain resources until after harvest, but carries penalties if the crop fails to meet projected yields. A third option permits payment in labor rather than goods, effectively conscripting you for additional work on royal projects during the coming year. The discussion of payment options reveals your family's precarious economic position. The grain stores accumulated during your months of pyramid construction, already depleted by your illness and medical expenses, cannot cover immediate tax payment without risking starvation if the harvest disappoints. Yet, the penalties associated with delayed payment could prove equally devastating if crop disease or weather problems reduce your yields below current projections. You find yourself calculating risks that have no clearly favorable outcome. Your wife participates in these discussions with quiet intensity, her questions revealing the practical wisdom that comes from managing household resources under conditions of constant scarcity. She inquires about the specific timing of payments, the acceptable condition of goods offered for tax purposes, and the procedures for requesting deadline extensions in case of genuine emergencies. Her detailed knowledge of these bureaucratic processes demonstrates how thoroughly taxation concerns penetrate daily life for agricultural families. The assessor's records include information about your family that extends far beyond agricultural production, encompassing details about livestock ownership, craft production, and even the approximate value of household possessions. This comprehensive documentation serves multiple purposes. It prevents taxpayers from concealing assets that might be subject to assessment, provides baseline information for future tax calculations, and creates detailed records of economic activity throughout the kingdom. Your entire economic existence becomes transparent to royal administration while remaining largely mysterious to yourself. As the assessment concludes, the tax assessor provides you with a clay tablet marked with hieroglyphic symbols that represent your family's tax obligations for the coming year. These marks, incomprehensible to your illiterate eyes, nonetheless carry the full weight of royal law and the enforcement power of the pharaoh's administration. The tablet becomes a permanent reminder of debts that must be paid regardless of personal circumstances or agricultural setbacks that might affect your ability to meet the specified obligations. The soldiers accompanying the tax assessor maintain their vigilant presence throughout the entire process, their weapons and armor serving as constant reminders of the consequences facing those who might consider defaulting on royal obligations. Their disciplined bearing and professional equipment indicate training and loyalty that place them firmly in service to central authority rather than local communities. These men represent the military force that ultimately backs every tax assessment, every bureaucratic decision, and every demand for compliance with royal policy. After the official party departs for the next village, your community gathers to discuss the assessments and their implications for family survival over the coming year. The conversations reveal a range of responses to tax obligations. Some families express confidence in their ability to meet the demands. Others worry about the consequences of potential crop failures. And a few consider desperate measures like selling land or livestock to generate necessary payment. These discussions take place in hushed tones, as open criticism of royal taxation policy could be interpreted as seditious activity. The evening meal becomes an occasion for careful planning, as your family reviews the tax obligations and calculates strategies for meeting them while maintaining adequate nutrition throughout the year. Your wife's mathematical skills prove essential for these calculations. Her ability to project consumption needs and harvest yields, providing the foundation for decisions that will determine whether your household survives until the next growing season. The complexity of these calculations demonstrates how taxation transforms simple agricultural families into reluctant accountants forced to track resources with precision that would be admirable in more favorable circumstances. As night falls, you reflect on the fundamental relationship between individual labor and royal power that defines existence in your world. The grain you plant, tend, and harvest with your own hands will feed not only your family, but also the vast administrative apparatus that governs your life. The fruits of your labor support not only your immediate survival, but also the construction of monuments, the maintenance of armies, and the luxurious lifestyle of a ruling class whose existence depends entirely on the productive capacity of farmers like yourself. This knowledge carries both pride in your essential contribution to civilization and resentment at the small portion of your own production that remains for your family's use. The growing season reaches its midpoint with your crops showing promising development despite the challenges of your recovering health and the looming burden of tax obligations. Your wheat stands knee-high with healthy green stalks that sway gently in the river breeze, while the barley displays the robust growth that suggests adequate yields if the remaining weeks pass without major disasters. Yet the very success of your agricultural efforts creates new anxieties, as a good harvest will attract the attention of merchants whose trading activities can prove both essential for family survival and potentially ruinous for unwary farmers. The first merchant arrives on a morning when the air carries the scent of distant rain, his small caravan consisting of 3 donkeys loaded with goods and 2 assistants who eye your village with the calculating gaze of men accustomed to evaluating commercial opportunities. His appearance marks him as someone who operates between the worlds of urban commerce and rural production. His garments show quality fabric and skilled tailoring, yet they bear the practical modifications necessary for travel through dusty countryside and muddy agricultural regions. The merchant's arrival sends ripples of excitement and apprehension through your community. His pack animals carry goods that rarely appear in rural villages: bronze tools superior to the ones you currently use, pottery vessels of exceptional quality, linen cloth woven with intricate patterns, and small quantities of exotic spices that can transform the monotonous diet of grain and vegetables that sustains agricultural families. These luxuries represent temptations that must be weighed against the harsh mathematics of survival in a subsistence economy. The merchant establishes his temporary market in the village's central area, unpacking his goods with theatrical flair designed to maximize their appeal to potential customers. He arranges his merchandise to display both quality and variety, creating visual presentations that make his offerings appear more abundant and desirable than careful examination might reveal. His sales technique combines genuine product knowledge with the psychological manipulation that characterizes successful commercial activity throughout history. Your wife accompanies you to examine the merchant's goods, her practical eye evaluating each item for its potential contribution to family welfare. She shows particular interest in a bronze knife that would prove superior to your current iron blade for food preparation and leatherworking, while you find yourself drawn to a wooden plowshare that could significantly improve your field cultivation efficiency. Both items represent substantial investments that would strain your family's resources while potentially providing long-term benefits that justify their cost. The merchant's pricing strategy reveals his sophisticated understanding of rural economics and the seasonal patterns that govern agricultural wealth. He quotes prices in terms of grain quantities rather than abstract monetary units, demonstrating his awareness that farmers think in terms of harvest yields rather than standardized currency. His rates reflect not only the value of his goods, but also his assessment of local purchasing power and the urgency of individual families' needs for the items he offers. Negotiations with the merchant unfold according to ritualized patterns that both parties understand, though the underlying mathematics heavily favor the experienced trader over individual farmers. He begins with prices that assume immediate payment in high-quality grain, then gradually reveals alternative arrangements that might accommodate families whose current resources cannot support such transactions. These alternatives invariably involve credit arrangements that commit future production at terms favorable to the merchant rather than the farmer. Your neighbor enters into extended negotiations for a set of bronze agricultural tools that would revolutionize his farming efficiency but require payment equivalent to nearly a quarter of his projected harvest. The merchant offers to accept payment after the coming harvest at terms that initially appear generous. The farmer would pay slightly more grain than current market rates, but could acquire the tools immediately when they would provide maximum benefit during the current growing season. The arrangement's hidden costs only become apparent through careful analysis of the long-term implications. The credit terms that the merchant proposes include provisions that protect his interests while exposing farmers to considerable risk. If the harvest fails to meet projected yields, farmers remain obligated to deliver the agreed quantities of grain regardless of their families' nutritional needs. If they cannot meet these obligations, the merchant gains rights to seize other assets, including livestock, agricultural tools, or even portions of land holdings. These contracts effectively transfer agricultural risk from the merchant to the farmer, while ensuring profitable returns for commercial investment. You find yourself torn between desire for the merchant's superior goods and awareness of the dangers inherent in credit arrangements that commit future production. The bronze tools would undoubtedly improve your agricultural efficiency and might increase yields enough to justify their cost, yet the contractual obligations would leave your family vulnerable to catastrophe if crop disease, weather problems, or other unforeseen circumstances reduced your harvest below current projections. The decision requires calculations that balance potential benefits against risks that could prove catastrophic. The merchant demonstrates his goods with practiced expertise, showing how the bronze tools maintain sharper edges than iron implements and resist corrosion that degrades inferior metals. His product knowledge appears genuine, and his claims about superior performance seem credible, yet his sales presentation carefully avoids discussing the broader economic implications of the credit arrangements he proposes. This selective disclosure reflects commercial practices designed to maximize immediate sales rather than ensure customer satisfaction over time. Your wife's questions reveal her deeper understanding of household economics and the seasonal rhythms that govern family survival. She inquires about the specific timing of payments, the merchant's policies regarding crop failures, and the possibilities for renegotiating terms if circumstances change unexpectedly. Her concerns reflect practical wisdom gained through years of managing limited resources under conditions where miscalculation can result in genuine starvation rather than mere inconvenience. The merchant's responses to these questions demonstrate his experience with similar concerns from countless rural customers. He provides reassurances about his flexibility in dealing with legitimate hardships while carefully avoiding specific commitments that might limit his legal rights under the credit agreements. His answers sound reasonable and accommodating, yet the actual contractual terms remain heavily weighted in favor of the merchant's interests rather than the farmer's welfare. As negotiations continue, you observe the merchant's interactions with other village families and begin to recognize patterns that suggest coordinated commercial strategy rather than individual transactions. The timing of his visit, the selection of goods he offers, and the credit terms he proposes all appear designed to maximize his extraction of value from the upcoming harvest season. His presence represents not simply commercial opportunity, but a sophisticated system for transferring agricultural wealth from producers to traders. The merchant's assistant maintains detailed records of all negotiations and tentative agreements, his writing materials and careful documentation indicating the professional approach that characterizes successful trading operations. These records will form the basis for legally enforceable contracts that commit farmers to specific performance standards, regardless of changing circumstances. The assistant's literacy and record-keeping skills provide the merchant with significant advantages over illiterate farmers, who must rely on memory and verbal agreements. The social dynamics surrounding the merchant's visit reveal community tensions that extend beyond individual commercial transactions. Families with greater resources can afford to purchase superior goods that will enhance their agricultural productivity, while poorer households face exclusion from opportunities for improvement. These disparities threaten to increase over time as better-equipped families achieve higher yields and accumulate additional advantages through successive growing seasons. Late in the afternoon, the merchant begins applying pressure for final decisions, claiming that his schedule requires departure the following morning and that current pricing will not be available during future visits. This urgency appears calculated to prevent farmers from conducting the careful deliberations that might reveal unfavorable aspects of the proposed arrangements. The time pressure transforms what should be thoughtful economic decisions into hasty commitments based on incomplete analysis of long-term implications. Your family's evening meal becomes an occasion for intense discussion about the merchant's offers and their potential impact on your household's future. The conversation ranges across multiple considerations: the immediate benefits of superior tools, the risks associated with credit obligations, the possibility that other merchants might offer more favorable terms, and the broader question of whether commercial entanglements represent opportunities for advancement or threats to family security. These discussions reveal the complexity of economic decision-making for families operating at subsistence levels. As darkness falls, you wrestle with choices that illustrate the fundamental challenges facing agricultural families in ancient economies. The merchant's goods offer genuine opportunities for improving your family's productive capacity and quality of life. Yet, the credit arrangements necessary to acquire them create dependencies that could prove disastrous if circumstances change unexpectedly. The decision requires balancing immediate desires against long-term security in a world where miscalculation carries consequences far more severe than simple financial disappointment. You wake to the sound of your neighbor's urgent whispers, carrying across the pre-dawn darkness, his voice tight with the anxiety that accompanies agricultural crisis.